The night sky above Earth's orbit had always been a place of quiet wonder, a place where satellites floated silently and human eyes scanned the heavens for answers. For decades, people had looked up, imagining life among the stars but never seeing proof. Earth had its own problems, its own struggles, yet the thought that there might be something else out there, watching, waiting, never left the minds of those who worked in space research and engineering. On one quiet evening, a team of human engineers stationed on a small orbital repair platform noticed something unusual. At first, it was just a flicker on the radar, a tiny blip moving erratically near the edge of the platform's sensors. Their first thought was debris, broken pieces of old satellites or meteors drifting in the void. But as the object came closer, it became clear that this was not debris. The shape was too deliberate, too structured. It moved with purpose, yet it was damaged, its lights flickering in patterns that no human machine normally emitted. The lead engineer, someone who had spent years repairing satellites and unmanned crafts, felt a strange chill run down the spine. There was a familiarity to the movement, a hint that this thing out there was alive in some way, even if it was not human. The rest of the team gathered at the observation windows, eyes wide, hearts racing. Communication channels were opened, but there was no sound, no signal that could be understood. The object hovered, uncertain, almost hesitant. The engineers debated quickly. Some wanted to wait to observe from a safe distance. Others felt a different pull, a pull of instinct, of responsibility. This was a being in need, damaged and vulnerable. They knew that in space, hesitation could mean death. In the end, it was a simple decision. They had to act. They launched the repair shuttle, small but fast, guided by human skill and intuition rather than pre-programmed routines. As they approached the craft, the engineers saw that it was unlike anything built on Earth. Its surface shimmered with colors that seemed to shift depending on the angle of light, and delicate structures extended outward like the wings of some otherworldly insect. There were cracks, deep gashes that exposed glowing cores leaking energy in slow, dangerous pulses. Yet despite the damage, there was something almost fragile in its presence, something that called for care rather than fear. The engineers docked, with the craft carefully, their hands steady even as their hearts raced. They had done countless repairs on human machines, but this was different. The tools felt heavier in their hands, and every adjustment they made seemed to require more attention, more thought. They did not know the language of the craft. There were no manuals, no instructions, no assurance that anything they did would work. Yet they proceeded, guided by a simple principle that had defined their species for millennia: help those in need. When the hatch opened, the sight inside was both terrifying and mesmerizing. Creatures unlike any human had ever seen floated in. The interior, suspended in a kind of soft gravity, their forms glowing faintly, their limbs delicate and complex. They were not hostile. They were weak, injured, and entirely dependent on the humans who had dared to reach them. For a long moment, the engineers just stared, trying to understand how to proceed. Then instinct took over, hands that had repaired. Satellites, wiring, and engines now worked on the living craft and its passengers with careful precision. Every connection restored, every seal patched, was done with care. There was no fear, only focus and compassion. Time passed differently. In the weightless silence, what could have been hours felt like moments, and yet every movement mattered. Every decision was critical. The craft responded to their touch in subtle ways. Light stabilized, energy flowed more smoothly, and the creatures inside moved slightly, as if acknowledging the help they were receiving. There was a strange sense of communication, not through words but through action and response. The humans understood in a way deeper than logic that their care was making a difference. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity but was likely only a few hours, the repair was complete. The craft hummed with renewed life, and the injured beings inside appeared more stable. They did not speak, they did not gesture in ways humans could easily interpret. Yet there was gratitude in their presence, a quiet acknowledgement that these humans had done something extraordinary. The engineers watched as the craft slowly pulled away from the platform, rising into the blackness of space. It moved smoothly now, no longer erratic, no longer in danger. And then, in a moment that would remain etched in the memory of everyone present, it turned ever so slightly, just enough for the engineers to see a pattern of light pulses. To humans, it was simple, almost poetic, a heartbeat, a simple rhythm that spoke of life, of connection, of trust. When the shuttle returned to the platform, the engineers were quiet. They had done something beyond repair or maintenance. They had reached across the boundaries of species and shown care in the purest form. For the first time, humanity realized that their touch, their empathy, and their willingness to help could resonate far beyond Earth. Word of the event slowly spread, first among scientists and engineers, then to broader networks. People were amazed, frightened, and inspired all at once. Some wondered what this meant for humanity's place in the universe. Could Earth really be the home base for creatures from distant galaxies? And why had they chosen humans, imperfect and fragile, as they were, to trust with their lives and technology? The questions would take years to answer, but the lesson of that night was clear. Humanity's strength was not just in machines, weapons, or intellect. It was in the simple, unspoken acts of care that had always defined them. Repairing a machine, helping a neighbor, saving a life. These were not small things. They were the foundation of something far greater, something that even advanced civilizations could recognize and respect. In the quiet that followed, the engineers returned to their routines, but nothing felt the same. Every tool, every repair, every shift in the orbital platform carried a new weight, a new understanding. The universe was no longer distant. It was connected, and humans had found a place in it, not by force or cunning, but by compassion and skill applied with care. That night marked the beginning of a relationship that would change humanity forever. The first encounter with the damaged alien craft was not just an emergency, it was the start of a bond that would prove the unique power of the human heart. Humanity had learned something that no book, no lecture, no technology could teach. That empathy, attention, and courage could reach across the stars, touching lives in ways that defied logic and reason. The first repair station in Earth's orbit became a symbol, not of human dominance, not of conquest, but of care and reliability. And the humans who had been there that night carried with them a secret knowledge that even in the vast, indifferent expanse of space, the simple act of helping another being could echo across worlds, shaping the destiny of species in ways that no one could predict. As the orbital platform continued its quiet watch, engineers would sometimes look at the night sky, remembering the heartbeat of light that had spoken to them. They could not know where the craft had gone, or if it would ever return, but they knew one thing with certainty. The universe had recognized humanity's power. Not in war, not in science alone, but in the steady, careful hands of those willing to help. And so, humanity's journey among the stars had begun, not with fire or weapons, but with a quiet, simple choice, to help when it was needed, to repair when it was broken, and to trust that even the smallest act of care could reach across the cosmos. After the first encounter with the damaged alien craft, life on the orbital repair platform changed in ways that no one had expected. The humans who had worked that night returned to their routines, yet everything felt different. Even the silence of space seemed heavier, more meaningful. They had touched something far beyond Earth, something alive yet foreign, and it had left an impression that could not be erased. At first it was just a memory, a heartbeat of light in the dark, a pulse that seemed impossible yet undeniable. But soon the memory turned into reality. More crafts began to appear near Earth's orbit, not in large numbers but enough to be noticed. They did not attack. They did not demand. They hovered, sometimes damaged, sometimes whole, almost as if they were observing the humans who had helped the first craft. The orbital engineers watched with a mixture of awe and caution. Each new craft that appeared carried the same strange elegance, glimmering surfaces, unusual geometries, and a quiet, almost fragile presence. It was clear that these beings had no interest in harming humans. Instead, they seemed curious, perhaps even tentative. The question that haunted everyone was the same. Why Earth? Why humans? Among billions of planets and countless civilizations, why had they chosen this one? As the days passed, the engineers began to notice a pattern. The crafts that approached Earth often had minor malfunctions, flickering lights, broken panels, weak energy cores. It was never severe enough to destroy them outright, but enough to make survival difficult without assistance. And each time, the humans responded. They repaired, patched, and stabilized. They did not fully understand the technology, but their actions were guided by instinct, observation, and care. Each repair was slow, deliberate, and filled with attention to detail. During these repair missions, something extraordinary began to emerge. The crafts seemed to respond better to human hands than any automated system. Repairs that would normally take advanced alien machinery hours to complete seemed to stabilize almost instantly when a human engineer applied a simple adjustment. The patterns of energy flows smoothed out, glowing cores strengthened, and the creatures inside appeared more stable. It was as if human empathy, attention, and careful action were being absorbed by the crafts themselves. One night, a particularly large craft arrived, damaged but not critically. It hovered silently, its surface reflecting the Earth's blue glow. The engineers approached cautiously, aware that each interaction carried risk. Inside, the beings were fragile, their forms suspended in faint light moving only slightly. They did not communicate in any language humans could understand, yet there was a rhythm to their movements. The engineers instinctively followed it, adjusting controls, connecting circuits, and sealing leaks. Hours passed. Time seemed to stretch and fold in the quiet of the orbital platform. Human hands moved with precision, guided not just by skill but by attention to the well-being of the creatures inside. Every adjustment was made with care, every seal tightened gently, every connection tested again and again. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the craft responded. Its light steadied, its energy flowed more smoothly, and the beings inside moved with more strength. It was during moments like these that the engineers realized something remarkable. The crafts were not just machines, they were alive in a way humans had never encountered. Their systems were organic, responsive, and capable of reacting to emotion and intention. The more humans cared, the stronger the crafts became. And in turn, the humans felt a connection, a subtle awareness that their actions were being acknowledged. It was a silent bond, formed in the quiet attention of repair and care. Outside the orbital platform, Earth began to notice. Observatories and satellites recorded unusual energy patterns near the platform. Some governments became concerned, fearing the unknown. Others were fascinated, eager to study what was unfolding. Yet the humans on the platform remained focused on the immediate task. Politics, fear, and speculation existed on the surface of Earth, but up in orbit, empathy and precision were the only things that mattered. As weeks turned into months, the interactions became routine, yet never boring. Each craft that arrived carried a new challenge, a new puzzle to solve. Engineers learned to observe subtle cues, the flicker of a light, the vibration of a panel, the faint movement of a being inside. They adjusted, adapted, and improvised. Slowly, a system of trust developed. The crafts no longer hovered uncertainly, they approached confidently, signaling their reliance on humans. There were moments of fear, of course. Once, a craft's energy core fluctuated dangerously during a repair. Alarms screamed and the humans froze for a moment, unsure if the repair would succeed. Then, with careful hands and calm focus, they stabilized the core. The craft responded, immediately lights brightening, movement becoming steady. It was a reminder that even in the vastness of space, patience, focus, and human attention could make the difference between life and death. The relationship between humans and these visitors deepened over time. It was not based on words or contracts, but on mutual recognition. Humans offered care and repair. The crafts offered trust and connection. Each repair became an unspoken conversation, a silent acknowledgement of interdependence. And in this way, humans began to understand something profound. Their strength was not only in technology, but in their ability to care, to observe, and to act with empathy. Back on Earth, the story of the orbital repairs inspired wonder and debate. Scientists speculated about the nature of the crafts and the beings inside. Philosophers and thinkers discussed what it meant for humanity's place in the universe. Artists captured images of the glowing, fragile forms and the humans tending to them. Children looked up at the night sky, imagining themselves among the stars, reaching out to the unknown with gentle hands. The engineers themselves were changed. They were no longer just repair specialists. They were witnesses to a new kind of connection, a bridge between species and worlds. They understood that this bond was delicate, fragile, and required constant attention. Every repair carried responsibility. Every action carried weight, yet they accepted it willingly, knowing that their care mattered in ways no one on Earth could fully understand. One evening, a small group of crafts approached the orbital platform together. They moved in formation, their lights pulsing rhythmically, almost like a song without sound. The engineers prepared, knowing that the repair would require all their focus. The creatures inside the crafts moved slightly, acknowledging the humans. There was no fear, no hesitation, only trust. And in that trust, the humans found a quiet joy, a reminder that their choices, their empathy, and their care had created something extraordinary. By now, patterns were emerging. Engineers began to recognize specific signals. A certain flicker meant a core needed stabilization, a gentle vibration indicated that a seal was weakening, and subtle color shifts in the beings themselves suggested health or distress. Humans were learning to read not machines but life, in a way that no automated system could replicate, and the crafts seemed to sense this, responding more quickly and effectively than ever before. It became clear that Earth's orbit had become more than a repair station. It had become a sanctuary, a place where fragile life could be healed, where trust could be formed, and where human empathy proved its power. The engineers often worked long hours, their hands steady even as their minds raced. They repaired, observed, and learned, all while feeling a profound connection to beings from far beyond their world. Through it all, the humans understood something that would guide them in the years to come. Their strength did not come from weapons, technology, or dominance. It came from the willingness to care, to pay attention, and to act with intention. They were not the strongest or the most advanced. They were humans. And that alone made them uniquely capable of connecting with life across the stars. And so, each repair became more than a technical task. It was an act of trust, a silent conversation, a bond that reached beyond words. Humans were no longer just observers of the universe, they were participants, healers in the vastness of space. The crafts returned time and again, bringing new challenges, new forms, and new lessons. Each visit reinforced the same truth. Humanity's power was in its heart, in its empathy, and in its capacity to act with care even when the outcome was uncertain. The orbital platform, once a small technical outpost, now carried the weight of this understanding. Engineers worked not for recognition, not for fame, but because they had learned something essential: that life, no matter how alien, responded to care, attention, and respect. And in this truth, humans discovered their place in the universe, not as conquerors, but as healers, bridges, and friends to those who could not survive without them. And so the quiet bond formed that first night continued to grow. Each pulse of light, each stabilized core, each careful adjustment was a step in a journey that would redefine humanity's understanding of power, connection, and purpose among the stars. Humanity had learned that the universe was vast, unknown, and full of challenges, but it had also learned that the heart of humanity could reach across that vastness and touch life in ways that nothing else could. As the weeks turned into months, the orbital engineers began to notice something that puzzled even the most experienced scientists. The alien crafts that kept visiting Earth's orbit were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Yet there was a consistent pattern. They seemed to respond far better when humans performed the repairs than when automated systems or artificial intelligence attempted the same tasks. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but over time it became undeniable. The engineers were cautious about drawing conclusions. After all, Human intuition was not something easily measured or quantified, but the evidence was clear. When a human hand adjusted a delicate component, reconnected a fragile circuit, or simply observed and nudged the systems into alignment, the craft stabilized faster, energy cores smoothed out, glowing panels lit evenly, and the subtle hum of life within the vessels seemed to strengthen. At first, the engineers assumed it was luck, or perhaps coincidence, but as the pattern repeated over dozens of repairs, they began to consider a more profound explanation. Perhaps it was not luck at all. Perhaps there was something unique in the way humans approached problems, something that no machine, no matter how advanced, could replicate. One night, a craft larger than any before approached the platform. It shimmered in the darkness, a floating constellation of moving lights and delicate surfaces. The engineers prepared themselves, knowing that this repair would test everything they had learned. Inside, the beings were weak, their forms pale and fragile, suspended in faint energy fields. Their movements were slow, almost hesitant, as if they were aware of the human's presence but unsure of what to expect. The engineers worked carefully. Every tool was chosen with attention, every motion measured. They did not rush. They observed the tiniest vibrations, the subtlest shifts in color, the faintest changes in energy flow. And as they adjusted circuits and patched panels, the craft responded in a way that seemed almost alive. Lights brightened gradually, energy fields strengthened, and the creatures inside began to move with more purpose. It was during this repair that the humans began to understand something profound. Their work was not simply technical, it was emotional. It was not just about connecting wires or stabilizing cores. It was about intention, patience, and care. Every movement carried thought. Every adjustment carried awareness. The humans were not only repairing the craft, they were communicating with it in a language that transcended words, a language of empathy, focus, and attentiveness. Other engineers on the platform observed and learned from these sessions. They began to notice subtle signs. When a human worked, with focus and calm, the craft seemed to anticipate adjustments, stabilizing faster and more effectively. When a repair was rushed or distracted, the craft's systems faltered, energy flows destabilized, and subtle glitches appeared. It was as if the crafts were sensitive to the mindset of the human performing the task, responding positively to calm, deliberate care, and negatively to stress or haste. Scientists on Earth began to study the phenomenon through data sent from the platform. They found that the craft's energy systems were highly complex, with layers of organic-like circuits intertwined with mechanical structures. These systems did not just follow programming. They reacted to subtle changes in intention, rhythm, and even emotional state. Machines could perform repairs, but only humans could heal the craft fully. The engineers began to think differently about their work. Every repair was no longer a mechanical task. It was an act of care. They approached each craft with respect, patience, and thoughtfulness. They discovered that even small gestures mattered. A gentle adjustment of a delicate panel could stabilize an entire system. A moment of observation, a pause to consider the craft's reactions, could prevent malfunctions. Their human intuition became a bridge between the alien technology and the life within it. One evening, a craft arrived that was severely damaged. Its energy fields flickered dangerously, and its hull bore cracks and scorches from an unknown event. The engineers knew this repair would be difficult, even dangerous, but they approached with the same focus and care they had developed over months. As they worked, adjusting circuits and stabilizing cores, something extraordinary happened. The craft seemed to respond to their very presence. Lights pulsed in rhythm with the engineers' movements. Energy flowed more smoothly when hands moved with intention, and the fragile beings inside began to recover more quickly than expected. It became clear that human repair was not just about fixing machines. It was about connection. The crafts responded to the humans not because of knowledge or skill alone, but because of attention, intention, and care. Machines could execute algorithms, but they could not replicate empathy. And in this moment, humans realized that their uniqueness lay not in technology or strength, but in the ability to care and act with awareness. This realization changed the way the engineers approached their work. They no longer saw repairs as tasks to be completed as efficiently as possible. Each repair became an act of understanding, a dialogue without words, a bond formed through focus and careful attention. The humans became healers, not only of the crafts but of the life within them. As the months passed, more crafts began to arrive, each with subtle differences in design and function. Yet the pattern remained. Humans were uniquely capable of stabilizing, repairing and healing the systems. And as the humans learned to read the subtle cues, the flicker of lights, the vibrations of panels, the faint shifts in energy, they became better not only at repairing the crafts, but at understanding them. The tower orbital platform became a place of quiet reverence. Engineers worked long hours, often in silence, focused on the delicate tasks before them. The relationship with the crafts was fragile, yet profound. Each repair reinforced a silent understanding. Humans could reach across the boundaries of species and technology in ways no other life could. And with that understanding came responsibility. Every repair carried weight. Every adjustment mattered. On Earth, news of the orbital platform's unusual activity began to spread, though details remained sparse. Some people were skeptical, dismissing reports as exaggeration or misunderstanding. Others were inspired, fascinated by the idea that humans could be making contact with life beyond their planet. But for the engineers, there was no need for fame or recognition. Their focus remained on the crafts, on the delicate work of repair, and on the quiet understanding that their actions mattered in ways few could comprehend. One day, a particularly fragile craft arrived with multiple malfunctions. Its energy core flickered erratically, panels were scorched, and the beings inside appeared weak and disoriented. The engineers approached carefully, taking extra time to observe the craft's subtle reactions. Every adjustment, every connection, every motion was deliberate. And as they worked, something extraordinary happened. The craft seemed to respond not only to their actions but to their presence. Lights pulsed more evenly, energy fields stabilized, and the beings inside moved with growing strength. It was a revelation. Humans were not merely performing repairs. They were interacting with a form of life in a way that was impossible for machines. Their attention, care, and intention were not just helpful, they were essential. The alien technology required human empathy to function at its best. And in that moment, the engineers understood something fundamental. The human touch, guided by awareness and compassion, had power that extended far beyond Earth. From that point on, the orbital platform operated with a new purpose. Engineers approached each repair not as a technical task, but as a responsibility, a dialogue, a partnership. They worked with calm focus, patience, and empathy, knowing that their actions directly affected the lives of beings from another world. And the crafts in turn responded with trust, arriving at the platform with a quiet confidence, signaling reliance on humans rather than machinery. The relationship between humans and the alien crafts continued to evolve. Each repair, each moment of careful attention strengthened the bond. The humans learned to anticipate needs, to read subtle signals, and to respond with precision and empathy. And slowly, a deeper understanding emerged. Humanity's power was not in domination or technology, but in the ability to care, observe, and act with intention. It was a lesson that would resonate far beyond the orbital platform. The universe was vast, full of life and possibility, but not all life responded to logic, force, or intellect. Some things, fragile, delicate, and alive, responded only to attention, care, and presence. And humans, with their capacity for empathy and focus, had discovered a place in that universe that no one else could occupy. As the orbital platform continued its work, engineers often paused to reflect. They had learned that repair was not just about technology, it was about understanding, connection, and trust. Each craft that arrived, each being that recovered, each energy core that stabilized, was proof that humans were capable of something extraordinary. Their hands, minds, and hearts were tools of connection, capable of reaching across the stars and making a difference in ways that machines alone could never achieve. And so, the orbital platform became more than a repair station. It became a sanctuary, a place where humans and alien life could meet, trust, and heal together. The engineers, once ordinary specialists, had become caretakers. The quiet rhythm of the orbital platform had become familiar to the engineers. Day after day, small and medium-sized alien crafts arrived, each with minor issues, each demanding patience, care, and precision. The humans had grown confident in their abilities, their intuition sharper, their understanding of the crafts deeper. Yet nothing could have prepared them for the day the massive flagship appeared. It arrived without warning, a silent shadow against the blackness of space. Unlike the smaller crafts, it was enormous, stretching hundreds of meters from tip to tip, its surface intricate and gleaming, like a living mosaic. Lights pulsed across its hull in slow, deliberate patterns. The humans on the platform watched in awe, their breaths caught in their throats. Even the most experienced engineers had never seen anything so vast, so alien, so alive. The flagship hovered near the platform, its energy fields flickering in unusual patterns. It was clear that it was badly damaged. Some panels were missing, exposing glowing cores. Others were scorched and cracked, with energy leaks threatening to cascade into catastrophic failure. The beings inside were weak, barely moving, and yet the craft radiated a silent authority. It was as if it had seen worlds, traveled galaxies, and yet it now depended on these fragile humans floating in orbit around a small blue planet. Panic and doubt rippled through the crew for a moment. This was no ordinary repair. It was unprecedented. The flagship could have been a threat, intentionally testing humanity, or it could have been an accident. There was no way to know. Some voices suggested retreating, even abandoning the repair. Others argued that hesitation could mean failure, even disaster. In the end, the lead engineers made the decision. They would proceed. They approached carefully, their shuttle weaving toward the massive hull, each movement deliberate. They could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on them, heavier than any mechanical task they had ever undertaken. Every hand on every tool was steady, every eye trained on the subtle reactions of the flagship. It was more than a machine, more than a craft. It was a life form, and it was fragile. As they docked, the engineers took a moment to observe. Energy flows were chaotic. Panels hummed unevenly, and the beings inside seemed to drift, barely conscious. The first adjustment was delicate, reconnecting a power node that controlled the main energy distribution. One wrong move could destabilize the entire ship. The engineers exchanged silent nods and began. For hours, they worked. Time became irrelevant, the platform around them disappearing into a tunnel of focus. Every connection, every seal, every circuit adjustment was done with painstaking care. They did not rush. They observed, paused, and adjusted again. The craft responded slowly at first, lights stabilizing in faint pulses, energy flows smoothing. But, as the engineers continued, the flagship seemed to awaken. There were moments of fear. One panel began to flare, a small surge of energy threatening to cascade. The engineers froze, then carefully redirected the flow, stabilizing the system without panicking. Another time, a subtle vibration indicated a fragile structure was about to fail. Quick hands and careful thought prevented collapse. Every action mattered, every decision carried weight, and the humans worked with precision born of empathy and focus rather than mere technical knowledge. Gradually, a pattern emerged. The engineers realized that the flagship responded to their intentions. When they worked calmly and deliberately, systems stabilized faster. When hands moved with focus, energy cores synchronized. It was as if the craft could sense the humans' attention and rewarded it with stability. Machines alone could never replicate this connection. Only humans acting with awareness and care could heal the flagship fully. As the hours passed, the flagship seemed to communicate, not with words, but through subtle shifts in light and energy. Pulses indicated status, vibrations indicated need, and slowly, the engineers learned to interpret the patterns. Every adjustment became a silent conversation. The humans were learning not just to repair but to understand, to respond with empathy to a life form far beyond their comprehension. By the time the repair was nearly complete, the flagship was glowing softly, its energy field stable, and the beings inside moving with renewed strength. The engineers took a moment to step back, to watch the immense craft rise, seemingly lighter, more alive. And then it happened. The flagship pulsed in a slow, deliberate rhythm that resonated through the platform, through the shuttle, through the very bones of the humans who had repaired it. It was not a signal they could understand fully, but it was clear. Gratitude, trust, acknowledgement. This moment was a turning point. Humanity had faced a test unlike any before. The flagship could have been indifferent, even hostile, but it had chosen to rely on humans, to trust their hands, their attention, and their care. And humanity had risen to that challenge. It was not knowledge or technology that had made the difference. It was empathy, focus, and patience. Back on Earth, news of the flagship's arrival and repair began to leak. Scientists, governments, and media outlets speculated endlessly. Some doubted the story entirely, calling it exaggeration or fantasy. Others were fascinated, imagining the possibilities of humans interacting with alien life. But for the engineers, the experience was deeply personal, almost spiritual. They had touched something extraordinary and fragile, and they had succeeded not through force but through care. In the days that followed, the engineers continued to monitor the flagship. It hovered near the platform, occasionally pulsing, seemingly waiting for them. The subtle bond formed during the repair persisted. The humans realized that their relationship with the crafts was evolving. They were no longer just repairers. They were trusted partners, guardians of fragile life and facilitators of interstellar communication. The flagship itself became a symbol, not just of alien technology, but of what humanity could achieve through empathy and attention. It demonstrated that strength was not always in power or knowledge, but in care, patience, and the willingness to act with awareness. Humanity had proven itself capable of something extraordinary, something that no machine, no weapon, no algorithm could replicate. The engineers also recognized the responsibility that came with this trust. The flagship, massive and powerful, could have caused destruction if mishandled. Its reliance on humans was both a gift and a burden. Every repair, every adjustment, every decision would carry consequences far beyond the orbital platform. And yet, they accepted it willingly, knowing that their actions mattered not only to the beings inside the craft, but to the future of humanity's place in the universe. As weeks passed, the flagship became a regular presence near the platform. It did not move far, and it did not interfere with operations. Instead, it seemed to observe, to protect, and to learn. The engineers could feel its presence as a quiet reassurance, a subtle acknowledgement of the bond formed during that first repair. And with each passing day, the humans grew more confident, more aware of the unique role they had discovered in the cosmos. Other smaller crafts continued to arrive, and the engineers applied the lessons learned from the flagship. Every repair, every interaction became an opportunity to strengthen the bond, to learn more about these extraordinary life forms, and to understand the subtle ways in which empathy and attention could influence technology and life alike. It became increasingly clear that the humans' power was not in technology alone, but in the unique combination of skill, focus, and compassion. They were capable of repairing what machines could not, stabilizing what logic alone could not, and forming connections that transcended language, species, and even the boundaries of known science. One evening, as the engineers watched the flagship pulse softly in the blackness of space, they reflected on what had just occurred. Humanity had faced a test unlike any before, and they had passed. The challenge had been immense, the responsibility enormous, yet the result was simple and profound. Trust had been formed not through force but through care. Humanity had discovered a strength deeper than technology, a power rooted in attention, empathy, and action, and in that realization lay a truth that would guide humanity in the years to come. The flagship, massive and mysterious, was no longer just an alien vessel. It was a symbol of what humans could achieve when they acted with care and awareness. The orbital platform was no longer a mere repair station. It was a bridge, a sanctuary, and a testament to the quiet, profound power of human empathy. Humanity had been tested, and it had shown that even in the vast, indifferent expanse of space, attention, patience, and care could create bonds, stabilize life, and earn trust across species and worlds. The engineers understood that this was only the beginning. The flagship's arrival had opened a door to something greater, something that would redefine humanity's role among the stars. And so, the orbital platform continued its work, carrying the weight of responsibility with calm determination. Every repair, every pulse of energy, every careful adjustment was a continuation of that first test, a demonstration that human hands, guided by empathy, could stabilize life and technology alike. The flagship, a silent guardian in orbit, was living proof that humanity's heart, its capacity to care, was more powerful than anyone had imagined. Life on the orbital platform had become extraordinary. After the arrival and repair of the massive alien flagship, the engineers had grown accustomed to working with beings and technology far beyond human understanding. Each day brought new challenges, new crafts, and new opportunities to learn. But among all these experiences, one truth became clearer than any technical manual. The connection humans shared with the alien visitors went far beyond simple repair. It started with small gestures. The aliens, though unable to communicate with words, began to send patterns of light and energy pulses that seemed intentional, as though inviting humans to observe and respond. At first, the engineers were cautious, unsure if these signals were warnings, instructions, or something else entirely. Slowly, through trial, error, and patience, they realized that the pulses carried information that could not be interpreted by machines alone. One evening, after completing repairs on a particularly fragile craft, the engineers noticed something remarkable. As they adjusted a damaged energy core, the craft emitted a series of rhythmic pulses, almost like a heartbeat. The engineers responded instinctively, synchronizing their adjustments to match the rhythm. And then, the impossible happened. The craft stabilized completely, faster and more efficiently than ever before, as if it had responded not only to their hands, but to their presence, their awareness, and their intention. The realization hit slowly, but it was profound. The alien crafts, with all their advanced technology, were responding to human care and attention in a way that no machine or automated system could replicate. Their systems were designed to survive, to function, and to travel across galaxies. But they thrived under human interaction. Humans were not just repairing machines, they were nurturing life, stabilizing fragile systems, and forming bonds that transcended species. News of these unusual patterns began to reach Earth. Scientists, astronomers, and researchers watched in fascination as data streamed from the orbital platform. They observed that the energy cores, circuits, and living systems of the alien crafts were harmonizing in the presence of human care. There were attempts to replicate the results with robotic systems, AI, and automation, but nothing worked. Machines could not replicate human awareness, empathy, or attention. Humans had a gift, subtle but powerful, that extended far beyond technology. One day, a group of crafts arrived together, moving in coordinated patterns. They hovered near the orbital platform, their lights pulsing in intricate sequences. The engineers prepared for repairs, but it quickly became clear that this was something different. The crafts were not damaged in the usual sense. They were whole, stable, and functioning. Instead, they seemed to be offering something: a gift, a connection, an opportunity for humanity to understand more than technology alone could teach. The engineers approached with curiosity and caution. As they observed, the crafts emitted a new kind of signal, a complex web of pulses, vibrations, and light. It was not aggressive, nor was it random. The signals carried patterns that seemed almost musical, resonating with human perception. As the engineers adjusted their instruments to respond, the crafts appeared to communicate more directly, as if inviting humanity to listen, to observe, and to interact on a deeper level. Over the next several weeks, the engineers discovered that these signals contained knowledge, not instructions, not designs for technology, but information about interstellar energy, communication, and life itself. It was as though the aliens were sharing a way of understanding the universe that humans could grasp only through awareness, empathy, and attention. They were giving humans access to frequencies and energy patterns that allowed them to stabilize fragile systems, heal damaged crafts, and even influence subtle life processes in ways previously thought impossible. The gift was not tangible in the usual sense. It was not a device, a blueprint, or a tool. It was knowledge, intuition, and awareness encoded in energy patterns that humans could interpret. Through careful observation, focus, and interaction, humans learned to harness this gift, applying it to repairs, stabilization, and even the subtle enhancement of life systems within the alien crafts. It was an entirely new form of power, one that required patience, care, and presence rather than force or intellect alone. As humans learned to interact with these patterns, they began to notice other effects. Energy flows in the crafts became more stable for longer periods. The beings inside moved with greater ease, recovered faster, and exhibited behaviors that suggested intelligence, awareness, and even emotion. The engineers realized that their attention, empathy, and careful action were not only repairing the crafts, but enhancing life within them. Humanity's influence was subtle, invisible to most observers, yet profoundly transformative. The orbital platform became a center of this new understanding. Engineers worked not merely as technicians but as participants in a shared process with alien life. Every repair, every adjustment, every observation became an act of connection. They learned to sense fluctuations in energy not only through instruments, but through intuition, awareness, and presence. Every pulse, every vibration, every flicker of light was meaningful, a dialogue without words that humans were learning to understand. One engineer described it as listening with more than ears, seeing with more than eyes, and touching with more than hands. The craft's responses were subtle, requiring patience, attention, and care to interpret, but once understood, they allowed humans to act in ways that no machine could replicate, stabilizing systems, healing damage, and even influencing the subtle patterns of energy within life itself. Over time, this bond deepened. The crafts began to arrive with less visible damage, yet still sought human interaction. It became clear that the aliens valued the presence, attention, and care of humans, not merely for technical repair, but for the stability and harmony humans could bring to their lives and systems. The orbital platform became more than a repair station. It became a sanctuary, a place where humans and alien life could interact, trust, and nurture one another. Earth began to notice subtle changes as well. Observatories detected energy patterns radiating from the orbital platform, patterns that seemed harmonious, stable, and unusual in the natural universe. Some scientists speculated that humans were emitting energy in ways previously unrecognized, affecting not only alien crafts but potentially the environment of space around Earth. While the details remained mysterious, the evidence suggested that human care, awareness, and empathy had tangible effects far beyond the orbital platform. The engineers themselves reflected on the significance of what was happening. Humanity had discovered a unique form of power, not through weapons, technology, or knowledge alone, but through awareness, care, and presence. The aliens had recognized this power, and in their own way, they were sharing it with humans. It was a gift that could not be stolen, copied, or manufactured. It required being fully present, fully attentive, and fully engaged with life, technology, and the universe. With this gift, humanity began to see its place differently. Humans were no longer merely inhabitants of a small blue planet. They were participants in a larger network of life and energy, capable of stabilizing systems, nurturing fragile life, and forming bonds that transcended species and worlds. Their power was quiet, subtle, and profound. It was the power to care, to observe, and to act with attention and intention, a power recognized by civilizations far more advanced than their own. As the engineers continued their work, They realized that the gift was not limited to alien crafts. The awareness and energy they had learned to harness could be applied in other contexts, in human systems, in ecological networks, and potentially in communication across vast distances. Humanity's ability to perceive, attend, and care became a force that could stabilize, heal, and connect in ways previously unimaginable. The orbital platform became a hub of this new understanding. Engineers shared insights, refined techniques, and expanded the ways they interacted with alien life. Every repair became an opportunity to learn, every pulse of energy a chance to connect, and every subtle observation a step toward mastering a form of understanding that was uniquely human. Yet, even as humanity embraced this gift, they remained humble. They recognized that it was not dominance or intellect that had earned them trust, but empathy, awareness, and care. They had been given access to something extraordinary, and with it came responsibility. Every repair, every interaction, and every act of attention could affect life, technology, and the bonds between species. They approached each day with focus, patience, and a deep sense of purpose. The aliens, in their subtle and graceful way, continued to return, sometimes damaged, sometimes whole, sometimes simply to connect. Each visit reinforced the lesson. Humanity's true power lay not in conquest or knowledge alone, but in the ability to care, to observe, and to act with awareness. Humans had become healers, not of Earth alone, but of life, systems, and energy that spanned the stars. And so the orbital platform became more than a station. It was a place of learning, connection, and transformation. It was where humanity discovered that the heart, attention, and presence of humans could stabilize life and systems, influence energy, and form bonds that no machine or weapon could replicate. It was proof that humans had a unique place. The orbital platform had become a place of quiet marvel. The humans working there had long ago realized that their role was far more than repairing alien crafts. They had discovered that their attention, patience, and care had effects far beyond mechanical repair. They had learned that life, no matter how alien, responded to empathy, presence, and intention in ways that machines could never replicate. And now, that quiet realization was about to face its greatest test. One day, an enormous signal arrived, pulsing across multiple communication channels. It was unlike anything the humans had encountered before. The signal carried no words, only patterns of light, energy, and vibration, yet its meaning was clear. A fleet of massive alien vessels, far larger and more advanced than any craft they had encountered, was approaching Earth's orbit. The humans sensed tension, both within themselves and in the fleet itself. These were not ordinary visitors. They were the most advanced beings humanity had ever faced, traveling across the galaxy, observing and judging. The engineers prepared the platform. Tools were checked, repair protocols reviewed, and every instrument calibrated to perfection. But even the most precise equipment could not prepare them for what was coming. The fleet arrived in formation, a breathtaking display of geometry and light stretching across the darkness of space. Each ship radiated energy, power, and intelligence beyond comprehension. Yet despite their size and capability, they did not attack. Instead, they hovered, observing, waiting. It was then that the humans realized something extraordinary. The fleet had come not for conflict, but for observation, to witness something that only humans could offer. The smaller crafts and the flagship that humans had repaired had acted as messengers. They had carried back stories of care, attention, and empathy, broadcasting humanity's unique abilities across the stars. And now, the galaxy itself had arrived to see the result. The engineers knew that the upcoming interactions would test everything they had learned. Each repair, each act of attention, each moment of focus would be under scrutiny. Yet there was no fear, only determination. They had faced challenges before, damaged crafts, fragile life, unstable energy systems. But this was different. The stakes were immeasurable. Humanity's reputation, not just survival, rested on their ability to act with care and awareness. The first craft to approach was enormous, its surface shimmering like liquid metal. Unlike any previous repair, this craft was mostly intact, but its systems were highly sensitive. A slight misalignment could cause cascading failures. The engineers floated toward it, every movement deliberate, every observation meticulous. They reached the core, a glowing web of energy far more complex than anything on Earth, and began their work. As they adjusted circuits and stabilized energy flows, they felt something remarkable. The craft was responding to more than their hands. It was responding to their presence, their focus, their intention. Each adjustment was mirrored by the craft's systems, every pulse of energy synchronized with their actions. The humans were no longer simply repairing machinery. They were participating in a living dialogue, influencing life itself through attention and care. The fleet watched in silence, and slowly, the humans realized the full extent of their power. It was not in weapons, not in speed, not in intellect, but in empathy, patience, and awareness. The alien beings recognized something that no technology could replicate: the human capacity to care, to notice subtle changes, and to act with intentional focus. In an instant, a profound truth became clear. Humanity's greatest strength was not conquest or dominance. It was compassion. One by one, more crafts approached, each presenting its own unique challenges. The engineers worked tirelessly, observing patterns of energy, adjusting delicate systems, and responding to subtle cues. The fleet, massive and silent, seemed to study them with interest, as if measuring humanity's capacity to act with care under pressure. Every repair, every stabilization, every act of attention strengthened the bond between humans and the alien visitors. In time, the humans noticed something incredible. The alien crafts began to respond even before adjustments were made. They pulsed in anticipation, synchronized with human presence, almost as if they had learned to trust and interact with humans instinctively. The engineers realized that their care was now embedded in the very systems of these beings. Humanity had influenced life itself, not through force, but through attention, empathy, and patience. As the days passed, the engineers began to communicate with the fleet in new ways. Words were unnecessary. Light patterns, energy pulses, and subtle vibrations formed a language of understanding that transcended species. Humans learned to interpret these signals, to respond intuitively, and to stabilize systems in harmony with the alien life. It was a conversation without words, a shared understanding that united vastly different beings across space. Back on Earth, scientists monitored the event with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Observatories detected changes in energy patterns. Across the solar system, subtle harmonies that suggested a resonance between human attention and alien life. Governments and media speculated endlessly, but the humans on the orbital platform remained focused. Their task was not recognition or fame. It was care, awareness, and responsibility. The fleet, massive and silent, eventually began to take notice of the smaller crafts that humans had repaired previously. Each interaction was an opportunity to witness human care in action. The aliens moved closer, allowing the humans to stabilize systems, adjust energy flows, and restore life within the crafts. Every success reinforced the truth that humanity's power lay not in technology or weapons, but in empathy, attention, and intention. One day, the engineers approached the flagship once more. Its systems were vast, complex, and highly sensitive, requiring every skill, every observation, every ounce of patience they had acquired. As they worked, they felt the presence of the fleet observing, sensing their focus, evaluating their care. It was the ultimate test, a challenge that would determine humanity's place in the galaxy. Hours turned into days as the engineers adjusted circuits, stabilized energy flows, and healed fragile systems. The flagship responded, slowly at first, then more fluidly, synchronizing with human presence. The engineers realized that their actions were not only repairing the ship, but teaching it, shaping its energy systems to respond to empathy and attention. For the first time, humans understood that their care was not passive, it was transformative. The fleet seemed to acknowledge this transformation. Energy pulses radiated outward from the flagship, resonating across the ships in formation. The Humans could feel it in subtle ways. The hum of the platform, the vibrations in the shuttle, the soft pulse of light along the hull. It was recognition, validation, and trust. Humanity had demonstrated its unique strength, the ability to stabilize life, technology, and energy through awareness, care, and presence. In that moment, the engineers realized that their work had consequences far beyond the orbital platform. They were no longer simply repairing crafts. They were shaping the way the galaxy perceived humans. They had shown that human power was not in conquest, weapons, or speed, but in empathy, patience, and attention. The fleet had witnessed it, and through them, the universe had taken notice. As the repairs concluded, the fleet began to move away, not in retreat, but in acknowledgement. Their patterns of light pulsed in rhythm with human actions, a silent communication of trust, respect, and recognition. The humans on the platform understood that they had passed a test that no machine, no weapon, no intellect alone could have achieved. Humanity's place in the galaxy was now secure, not through force, but through the quiet, profound strength of care. Back on Earth, news of the event reached select scientists and researchers. While details remained classified, the message was clear. Humanity had demonstrated something extraordinary. Humans had been recognized by life forms far beyond their planet as unique and essential. The ability to care, to observe, and to act with empathy had become humanity's greatest power, a force more potent than any technology, more lasting than any weapon. For the engineers on the orbital platform, life returned to a quiet rhythm. Yet nothing was ordinary anymore. Every craft, every pulse of energy, every subtle signal was a reminder of what they had achieved. Humanity had discovered that attention, presence, and care could influence life and energy across the stars. They had learned that compassion was not weakness. It was the key to survival, connection, and recognition in a universe full of life and possibility. In time, the orbital platform became a symbol, not of power or dominance, but of understanding, connection, and empathy. It was a place where humans had proven that their greatest strength lay not in force or intellect, but in the ability to care. Alien crafts continued to visit, not out of need alone, but out of trust and curiosity. And humanity continued to learn, grow, and participate in the delicate balance of life, technology, and energy across the stars. The humans understood that their role had changed forever. They were no longer passive inhabitants of Earth. They were healers, connectors, and participants in a universe that recognized their unique gift. Their hands, hearts, and minds were tools of transformation, capable of shaping life, energy, and trust in ways previously unimaginable. And as the stars stretched endlessly beyond the